Today is Thursday, July 9th, 2026, and today is National Don't Put All Your Eggs in One Omelet Day, which sounds like advice from someone who had a really bad breakfast. Or maybe it's just a reminder that having a backup plan is usually a good idea. And after digging through today's stories, I noticed that they all had something in common. None of them unfolded quite the way people expected. One satellite changed the world, even though it worked for only a few months. One space station ended its journey in a way no one had planned. And one military expedition became a lesson in what happens when confidence meets reality. History has a funny way of reminding us that even the best plans sometimes take unexpected turns. Welcome to Wait, That's Random, This Day in History. I'm C.L. Burns, voice actor, audiobook narrator, and someone increasingly convinced that history is mostly people improvising with confidence. On July 9, 1962, a small communications satellite named Telstar was launched into orbit. Today, we take global communication for granted. You can video chat with someone on the other side of the planet, watch a live sporting event from another continent, or complain about your internet connection while holding a device more powerful than the computers that sent astronauts to the moon. In 1962, none of that felt ordinary. Telstar wasn't the first satellite in space, but it became the first to successfully relay live television signals, telephone calls, and data across the Atlantic Ocean. For the first time, people in North America and Europe could see live television from across an ocean. Imagine trying to explain that to someone just a generation earlier. The world suddenly felt smaller. Countries felt closer. Events became shared experiences instead of yesterday's news. Ironically, Telstar itself had a surprisingly short career. Just months after its launch, radiation from high-altitude nuclear weapons tests damaged many of its electronic components. Its active life was brief, but its impact wasn't. Every communication satellite that followed owes something to that little metal sphere circling above the Earth. Sometimes, changing history doesn't require lasting forever. It just requires showing everyone what's possible. And of course, space has a way of reminding us that not every mission ends exactly as planned. On July 9, 1979, America's first space station, Skylab, re-entered Earth's atmosphere. When Skylab was launched in 1973, the plan was for it to remain in orbit until the space shuttle could visit, refurbish it, and give it a new lease on life. There was just one problem: the sun. During the 1970s, solar activity turned out to be stronger than expected. That heated and expanded Earth's upper atmosphere, creating more drag than NASA had predicted. At the same time, delays in the space shuttle program meant that there was no spacecraft available to rescue Skylab before its orbit decayed. Engineers did everything they could to control where it would come down, but no one could predict the exact location. And the public? Well, the public had a lot of fun with it. People joked about wearing hard hats. Newspapers tracked Skylab's orbit almost like the weather. Some companies even sold Skylab insurance in the incredibly unlikely event that a piece landed on your house. When the station finally re-entered, most of it burned up in the atmosphere. The remaining debris scattered across a sparsely populated part of Western Australia. No one was seriously injured, but for a few weeks, an entire planet found itself looking up. Our final story reminds us that sometimes the biggest surprises don't come from space. They happen because someone is absolutely convinced their plan cannot fail. On July 9, 1755, British General Edward Braddock marched confidently toward Fort Duquesne during the French and Indian War. On paper, his army looked unstoppable. Nearly 1,500 well-trained British regulars, colonial militia, artillery, superior numbers. Braddock had spent his career fighting on the battlefields of Europe. There, armies lined up in neat formations. They advanced in disciplined ranks. Battles followed rules. North America had other ideas. The route to Fort Duquesne wound through dense forests where visibility was limited and traditional battlefield tactics quickly fell apart. French soldiers and their Native American allies knew the terrain. They fought from behind trees. They moved quickly. They struck unexpectedly. When the ambush came, the British column dissolved into confusion. Orders became difficult to hear. Smoke filled the woods. Soldiers trained to fight in open fields suddenly couldn't even see who they were shooting at. General Braddock was mortally wounded. Nearly 2/3 of his force was killed or injured. It became one of the most devastating British defeats of the war. Among the survivors was a young officer named George Washington. During the battle, 2 horses were shot out from under him, and several bullets pierced his coat without striking him. The experience stayed with him for the rest of his life. Years later, during the American Revolution, Washington relied far more heavily on mobility, local knowledge, and adapting to the terrain than rigid European battlefield traditions. I've always found that fascinating. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the plans that fail. And while I was looking back across today's stories, they all reminded me that life rarely follows the script. Satellite exceeded everyone's expectations, despite its short life. A space station came home much sooner than anyone intended. A military campaign collapsed because the world refused to behave the way its commander expected. That brings us to someone whose own career took an unexpected turn, and turned out remarkably well. Born on July 9, 1976, Fred Savage became one of television's most recognizable child actors. If you grew up in the late 1980s or early 1990s, there's a good chance you remember him as Kevin Arnold on The Wonder Years. The show wasn't really about dramatic plot twists. It was about growing up. First crushes, awkward moments, family dinners, friendships. The small experiences that somehow became our biggest memories. It struck a chord with audiences because almost everyone could see a little of themselves in Kevin. What I appreciate most about Fred Savage's career, though, is what happened after the cameras stopped following him. Instead of spending decades trying to recreate his childhood success, he quietly built a second career behind the camera. He's directed episodes of dozens of TV series, earning a reputation as one of Hollywood's most respected television directors. Most child stars struggle to find a second act. Fred Savage simply found a different stage. And looking back across today's stories, I kept coming back to the value of having a backup plan. Telstar wasn't built to last forever. It simply needed to prove that a new idea could work. NASA never planned for Skylab to end its journey over Western Australia. General Braddock certainly didn't expect one of the worst defeats in British military history. And Fred Savage showed that when one chapter ends, another can begin in ways you never expected. Anyway, that's what kept jumping out at me while exploring July 9th. And here's a thought from inventor Thomas Edison that seems to fit today's stories. I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. If you'd like to hear more of my work, audiobooks, or other projects I've somehow gotten myself involved in, you can find everything over at waitthat'srandom.com. I'm C.L. Burns, and honestly, thank you for spending a little time being curious with me. I'll see you tomorrow.